Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to this very special edition of Tigers Explore. My name is Noa Segre, and I'm a senior strategist and visioner in Talent Garden, and I'm coming to you live from our beautiful campus in Milan. So Milan Isola is where we are this afternoon. And this afternoon, we're going to start with this very special session talking about the theme of the day, which is, of course, March 8th, which is Women's Day. And we're going to take a little bit of a different view on this special day, talking about how we can navigate our own career path in tech. And this is the agenda of today's event. So we will be joined in a moment by our very special speaker, who will give us a little bit of her learnings and her experience, also from interviewing other female leaders around the world, so we can understand a little bit about the Danish ecosystem, but a little bit also about how we see the global overview. Then Alexandra and I are going to have a little bit of a chat between us, so kind of like sharing notes and giving a little bit of our input back to the community. And of course, this session will end like every other session that we do with the Q&A with you, with our audience. Feel free throughout the session to send your comments. We are live on LinkedIn, YouTube, and Facebook, so feel free to write your questions in the comments, and we will address them throughout the session, but also in the dedicated Q&A session. And I'm going to now, I'm very happy to introduce our guest today. So our guest is Alexandra Ciobotaru, who's originally from Romania, but she actually moved to Denmark 5 years ago for studies and kind of stayed in Denmark since then. She built a thought leadership profile in the startup ecosystem, focusing on business and product development, and has been nominated not once, but twice for the Women in Tech Awards in 2018 and 2020, joining a very prestigious list of very interesting female tech profiles, such as the CEO of Microsoft and many other co-founders from Denmark. And this kind of motivated Alexandra to share her advice and kind of her career development across different channels. And she uses a multitude of events to inspire women, and we're looking forward to being inspired also today. She started her own podcast where she gets to interview leaders and role models from all over the world about their careers, asking them sometimes also tough questions, which is something that we're going to touch upon also today, but ask for advice. And I think this is one of the most interesting sides of what we do today, because we want to inspire, we want to give advice, but we also want to be asked for advice from others. So Alexandra, thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. We're very happy to have you with us, and the floor is yours. So go ahead, Alexandra.
Thank you so much, Noah, and a special thank you to the Talent Garden community. I have been humbled and really honored to be invited to speak at this event. It's a very important day for women because it's International Women's Day, and we must discuss some topics that maybe are not always easy to discuss and make some people uncomfortable. But I hope that we will open the floor to just be honest with what is our context and what can we do together. I prepared a short presentation about lessons from my career path. But I want to start with an exercise for all of you joining. And I wanted to invite everybody joining today to share if you resonate with my messages, to share if you resonate with the examples that I'm sharing, and share if you have any other lessons that we should all learn from. Without further ado, today we will talk about navigating a career path in tech. As Noah mentioned, I live now in Denmark, and I have been living here for the last 5 years, where I built my career. And I've started Femme Lead Podcast to share role models, female role models, and their career paths. I think I want to start by showcasing the importance of female role models and how do you see your life, because I feel that sometimes we maybe forget what guides us, and maybe we don't think that strategically on our aspirations and how to get there. Because the expectation of life is that it's a linear path and you go from A to B and it's a straight line. Especially when you graduate, or especially if you start a role, you think that a linear transition will happen every few years. And then reality hits and you realize that where a career path is quite complicated. And depending on your context, depending on your setup, depending on, the culture that you're in, the challenges that you have to face, it can look very different than some of your peers. So I wanted to just tell everybody from the beginning that it's okay if you think that your path is maybe different or harder or not what you expected. We are all faced with this, and it's okay to feel what we feel. So to move on from that feeling of it needs to be perfect, I want to share that for me, it was not an easy path. And it's even today, of course, I have a lot of challenges that I need to overcome. But I learned some things along the way that I think helped me build resilience. And I wanted to continue by sharing with you an exercise that I thought would really make sense for today's occasion, determining your North Star. North Star is a topic that I've known about from growth marketing. And in this setup, I discuss what guides you professionally. So there are a series of factors that once you start thinking about more and more, maybe you get some understanding of what you would want to have in your professional path. And those factors can be both personal and professional. It's quite important to do this exercise if you feel maybe that you are, unsure or stuck somehow with your situation, just to reflect on what you really want. And in order to determine your North Star, there are a couple of factors that you can take into account. These are factors that I decided to share, and this was a very great exercise shared at the Women in Product conference that I thought it's really relevant for today as well. So please feel free to choose what works for you. This is just a guiding exercise, if you may. So the first thing, job security. Knowing where you will work and that you have the security not to fear if you will be in that company or not. So for some of us, job security is a pretty important factor when we determine our North Star, what guides us in our career path. Knowing that where you will be offers you the security, where you will be working offers you the security of knowing that you will always have some sort of situation that is more or less made for you, and that you fit that role, and that you are welcome in the team. It's really something that will help you navigate your career path, because you don't want to feel every month that maybe it's not my place here. So having this job security feeling, it's part of some of our North Star. So it guides you in deciding what you want for your setup. Then the next one is self-realization. Doing the things that you really want to do, that is something that resonates with you. Feeling that you work towards a mission that really resonates with you, and that you grow in that path. So self-realization, it's another important part of determining your North Star. Likewise, financial security. Very important. It's an important factor for your private life. Of course, you want to feel secure with money, and that you don't have to worry about providing for yourself and your family. You want to feel secure with money, maybe above basic needs, and feel that you are really striving towards the life that you want to live. So being in a place that offers you financial security, it's another factor in determining your North Star, for example, or it could be. The same goes with work-life balance, which now, of course, is being tackled more and more. But it is something that it's very important to discuss, because maybe in the Nordics, I live in Denmark, so we discuss work-life balance, and it's a topic that it's very tackled with colleagues. It's something that, it's an integral part of our lives. So we shouldn't just not discuss it. We shouldn't put it aside. But in other cultures, maybe it's not as discussed. Work-life balance is important because you cannot buy time with money. And you do need time for yourself. You need time for your family. Maybe you need time for a side project. Maybe you have hobbies that you want to engage in. So having that time for self and for your hobbies and so on is very important. I really suggest, if you feel that work-life balance is something that you need to add on your list, to discuss with your manager or with your team what are the opportunities within the company, because especially in the last years, companies have acknowledged the need for work-life balance. So they will help you, hopefully, in this journey, if it's not something that is part of a company culture yet. To a certain extent, personal growth and capabilities can be equally an important part in determining your North Star. Will this setup help me grow in my journey? And will I get new capabilities by doing those tasks? Will this company invest in me? Am I going to have some sort of setup where I can learn more? These are questions to ask yourself, especially if you want to feel satisfied with your current setup. The next thing is company culture and values. Is this company having the same values that I have? Are we in sync? I think that sometimes, and please correct me if you felt differently, but I feel sometimes people underestimate the importance of culture fit. When you feel you belong to that culture, that you go to work every single day, it really gives a different feeling than when you feel you don't belong there. So you feel like an outsider, or you're wondering whether this is the right fit for me. It's important to have that culture fit and to have the values of the company connected. So definitely a factor that I encourage all of you to consider. The next thing, job level and seniority. Is having the opportunity of progressing in your career an important part of your North Star, of what guides you in your career? Do you want to have those opportunities? Is the current setup offering you that opportunity, or in the future could offer you that opportunity? If this is important for you, how can you get closer to getting that factor in as well? So definitely another point to consider if it is something of interest to you. Likewise, horizontal and vertical experience, and this is the last factor that I outlined here. So do you want to become a generalist, or do you want to be an expert? Do you have the opportunity within the space that you're in to really deep dive into a subject, maybe even try different arrangements? And for example, in graduate programs, you have the opportunity of going in different departments to see what you would like more and what you would have a better fit with. Is this something that you want to experience? Do you have the option at your current place, or maybe you want to have it in order to explore those situations? So if this is something for you that is important, add it as part of determining your North Star, and put it as a factor that could guide your journey. Then the next thing would be to add a point as an exercise where you are at. So this black dot, where do you think that, in sync with all of the factors that could represent your North Star, where are you now? Then let's say that not all of them are even with dots. So this is, of course, it can also be for the future, something that maybe you don't have, so you want to have in the future. You can then map out by putting another color dot, for example, of where you want to be in the future. This is a personal exercise, so I'm not saying that you should, share this with all of your colleagues and say, I'm here, but I want to be here. But it's more like for you to consider, at the next opportunity, when I have a new job, or when I'm looking for a new job, or when I get the opportunity to progress in my career, will I get closer to some of those points in my North Star where I want to get closer to, like job level, seniority, or personal growth? Will I get closer to getting there? And this is an exercise that you can do every few months or every time you change your position. But I think it would really help you map out, where is it that you want to go to, and in sync with what your factors that determine your guideline are, how can you get there? And you can even discuss some of those points with your manager, knowing, for example, that you would want to become closer to a vertical experience or more of an expert. Go to your manager and say, hey, I thought about it, and in the future I would like to be more of an expert in growth marketing. Is there a possibility for me to move into that direction? So kind of helping yourself getting there. I really hope this was a useful exercise. I thought it was a brilliant way of sharing, what is it that you consider your career North Star to be. So definitely take this as an exercise that you can use every time you need to reflect on your path. Now, the next thing is lessons from my career path. And as I've shared in the beginning, this is a personal journey, and it's based on my career in Denmark as an expat. So I would be very curious if you want to also share some of your learnings to share to have this opportunity of learning from each other. I have 5 lessons that I'm going to go through in a few minutes, and then we're going to go to the fire chat. The first lesson that maybe I wish I knew earlier, it's your worth is not attached to a job title. How many times have you thought like this? My values is tied to a sliding salary scale. If I'm paid, the more I'm paid, the more I'm worth. If I'm paid more, I must be worth more. The more I'm promoted, the more I feel appreciated. I think this creates a problem because linking self-worth to a job can be a dangerous game. Considering the times we're living, if you have been through a situation where you lost your job or where you fear for your job or where you are maybe not as satisfied with the situation that you're in, you would not only feel at ease on that situation, but your whole sense of self would be thrown off. So as a reminder, you are enough and your worth is not attached to a job title. An exercise you can do is to, from time to time, list points of gratefulness and 3 of your strengths. You can make this exercise every month if you need this reminder. 3 points of gratefulness and 3 of your strengths to remind yourself of, what are some of those things that really, those skills and those things that really make you a great professional, no matter of your job title or your situation right now. Another thing that is important is the mindset. How do you see yourself? How do you speak to yourself? Those are important conversations to have, and realize that you choose your sense of self. It's an internal decision, not an external one. So self-worth is definitely a subject that I wish I discussed with a life coach earlier in my career. I think oftentimes we attach this personal worth equals a title. And of course, it makes sense if you think about the effort and energy that you put into school, internships, interview, getting a job, and so on. But in the long run, what matters is really if you've enjoyed your experience. And one of my podcast guests, Anja Monrad, a senior vice president at Dell here in Denmark, she was just really straightforward. And she said, it's just a job. If you don't have this one, you might have another one. So be very careful how you identify yourself with that job so you don't become one with it. It's definitely a reminder that it's okay to be, motivated by a mission. So you can ask yourself, what is the mission that I want to work towards? And then it will make this differentiation will really make a big difference for your satisfaction in life, I think. Tell me if this resonates with you. I would be very curious to know your opinion. The second thing, set your own pace. It's never too late or too early. Boy, if I knew this, I think I would have been maybe less in a rush to do everything in a year, because I read somewhere in an article that some 19-year-old CEO made, I don't know what invention. And I was thinking, what am I wasting my time on? I think oftentimes in our career paths, we feel that we are not there yet and that we should have been. I have been given the responsibility of being a team manager at 23 years old. I had 11 student workers in my team, and I was responsible with 2 of my colleagues I was responsible for around a team of 30, 35 people in our department. And that's a lot of responsibility. And even if we are discussing a part-time job in the beginning, that they then became also a full-time job, after a while, I started asking myself, is this enough? Shouldn't I have been doing something else? So I put this pressure on myself that something had to change after a year or 2, because I couldn't do this forever. Now, I'm not saying that you shouldn't progress, but I'm also saying that you should not set the pace based on somebody else's expectation, but on what you want and can do. It's never too late. It's never too early. I am a person that planned, I like to think about my career, and I've been thinking about my career ever since I started working in a full-time context. And I was told that I'm in a rush. And that might be true for somebody, but for me, it was just the right thing that I felt was, okay, I want to progress from this experience to something else. And it's okay if you decide for yourself, okay, this is my process, and for me, this is my pace, and this is how I want to work. In the same time, the idea of running, I think it's very relevant for many of us trying to do everything in a year. So please share if you have some experiences similar, because I would be very curious to know how you've navigated that. I think it's important to have different experiences and different learnings to help you understand what you really want to do. And to link with one of my podcast guests, Antisa Jensen, who's an emotional intelligence coach, she said something that really resonated with me. You can change your mind. So if you've made a plan and then you decide that maybe this is not the right plan for me, then you can change your mind, and then you can decide to start over. You can decide to change the trajectory of your plan. You can decide to give yourself some time to reflect. Just set your own pace and do the things that you need to do in order to be happy with the decisions that you take. Another thing that, somewhere on the internet, this might sound different, but I really thought about it in this context. Don't compare your chapter 1 with someone else's chapter 10. And no matter how you find it on the internet, I think the point here is that, you found your passion, but the way you approach it is very important for your own satisfaction, because if you are in the first years of your career or in the first month at a new job, even if you've worked in that field for a while, if you compare your results with someone else's results that have worked in that complete, setup for a similar setup or maybe a different setup, but with other resources, if you compare it directly, then it will always feel different. So why do it? It's similar to setting your own pace and having your own trajectory. It's important to be aware of that. And a point that I wanted to make here, that Brittany Arthur, a podcast guest on design thinking, that has lived abroad and has now an agency in Japan, she talks about a concept called linear versus non-linear path. And thinking here in the career space, I showed you how the expectation looks of like a career path, and then how in reality it looks very different. Now, the more you move away from a linear life that is, correlated to something that society thinks this is the way things progress, the more you move away from that, the more complicated it will actually be. So what I mean by this is that if you live abroad, so you are already an outsider because you've moved to a new country. If you are looking for a job, in a new space that maybe you don't have a lot of experience in, of course it will be hard, because if you compare yourself to everybody that is joining that space that maybe has a different background or different, a setup, maybe they know they have a network, maybe they know somebody that they can talk to, of course it will look different. So thinking about linear versus non-linear path, it's really something to consider, that if you think something has a direct relation with a result, it's most likely not like that. The more you go further away from what that expectation looks like, the more you will see it's really complicated. So, just be kind to yourself, and don't judge yourself too much for all the situations that maybe don't work out your way. Which takes me to choosing your battles. Probably my favorite lesson, something that, it really changed a bit the perspective on what I decided to take on as a professional, because you decide to move forward in work or in life a certain way. And sometimes not everything we want to happen will happen. So we might want to move forward with the project, we might want to collaborate with our colleagues or our coworkers in a certain way, or we might just want to avoid the subject altogether. We don't want to be part of that conversation, yet there we are. So for our own sake, it's important to make a decision and choose what we want to be invested in versus what we do not mind just letting be. There are some battles there that you might take on to prove a point, or to say, okay, this is really something very important for me. I'm going to spend my energy and all of my resources to work towards this. But there will be situations where you being part of that conversation in a very, engaged way might not make sense. And in this I don't know, as an exercise that I think could make sense is if you work with teams in different locations, and then you have some disagreements or some I don't know, you had some different understandings of a situation. Remind yourself that it's really, it can really look differently on the other side. So maybe try to communicate and see where the miscommunication is, rather than trying to prove that point over and over again, not having, not meeting in the middle. And this was something that I learned the hard way in my career, because I was really invested in some situations that maybe I shouldn't have been. And it's okay not to win on all fronts, and just try to work towards teamwork and towards the mission of the organization that you're in. One of my podcast guests, Jada Haga, talking on management consulting, she really talked about, focusing on the vision and being flexible on the details. So prioritizing what you put your energy into, but looking at the bigger picture rather than fixating on all of the small details. What is going to take you closer to your goal? What is it that is going to help you move forward in your plan? If it's something really small and maybe something that will not matter in a few years, then maybe it's not worth investing so much energy in. And lastly, taking responsibility for your life. I thought a few minutes or more on how to frame this learning, because I think I got to this realization quite recent as well. I think that oftentimes we give our power away. Let me say that again. Oftentimes we give away our power. We think that everything happens outside of us, when in reality we decide how we react to a situation. So when I take decision, I consider what is under my control, and I am aware of the fact that I might not be able to influence the other party as well, and that is fair. I take responsibility for what I can do, and I don't overwork myself trying to control a setup that is clearly not in my control. I think this works both in a private setup and in a professional setup. So once you've decided to take responsibility for your situation and not let it affect you, then you will see that things will work out in your favor. And this is not about controlling your environment, because you really cannot control what's not within your power. So this piece of advice is really about deciding for yourself what you want to achieve and what life you want to build. And then the advice is to just ask for it. Ask for exactly what you want. Take responsibility for what you can do. And in some situation, asking exactly for what you need is the best decision. Asking for help, asking for support, asking for some time off, asking for a raise, asking for a promotion. And then if you ask directly, if you have this explicit conversation about, explicitly, I want to do this, and then you get the feedback that you get, then you decide how you take it from there. It works, in the same way of, if you get the feedback that you get, that you do great at work, for example, but you don't get a raise or a promotion, or you don't discuss that because it doesn't seem to be part of the conversation, but you want it to be part of the conversation, then you decide for yourself what you want to do. You can decide to start looking for something else. You can decide to restart this conversation, to move forward this conversation with a coach or with a mentor. If it's something important for you, take responsibility for it and say, hey, this is really important for me. I don't want to just let it be in there, and I'm just going to move forward with that. Taking responsibility for your life is about making conscious decisions to help live the life that you want. I noted that down because I really wanted to mention it. And with that one last piece of advice, I really want to thank you for your time. If you will allow me a bonus message that I thought of sharing today before the live stream, what I learned in the last year is that self-love is a topic that we do not discuss enough. And on Women's Day, I want to remind all the ladies joining that you deserve the best in life. And if you feel you are searching for the best in life, then that is your right. And it's important to love yourself first, because we cannot give to others if our own cup is not filled. We will only compromise on our well-being. Thank you all for listening. I hope this was useful and that you felt inspired and you resonated with my message.
Wow, Alexandra, I'm speechless. I have to say, I'm speechless. Thank you so much. I think that the message of self-love is so important, not just for women, for everyone at this moment. And I think it's very important that we realize that, first of all, we need to really, really love ourselves. And only when we get to that point can we actually succeed in everything else that we do. But all these points that you spoke about self-realization and, being able to change your mind and taking control over your life, but also, setting your own pace. And not comparing yourself to your chapter 1 to somebody else's chapter 10 is something I remember. Britney Spears is 3 months older than me. And when I was 18, I kind of looked back and I said, how did she do everything that she did? And I haven't done anything yet. So I think it's a very, very valid point. So thank you very much for all of your beautiful insights. And I'm going to throw at you a few questions and we can have like a little bit of a chat about that. Thinking a lot about what you said, I think that, I think that we're both of us are women, expats. So we both work in the world of technology and innovation. We live in countries that are not our homeland, but that we moved and we used to work in our country, we moved to another country, and we're women, which are two hurdles put in one, in a sense or another. I remember when I moved to Milan 3 years ago, that I think it was the first time where I realized that I really had to ask for help, but not help because I was helpless, but help because I needed support. And I remember that one of the things that was really, really a turning point in my experience of living in a new country was meeting this woman who I am now very proud to say she's my friend, a very successful lawyer in Milan. And I remember coming to her and I said, you know what, I'm kind of clueless, I'm kind of lost, I don't know what I'm doing, I'm not sure that I made the right choice, maybe I should just go back home. And she looked at me and she said, you know what, let's take it one step at a time and see what we can do. And she said, the most important thing that we always have to remember is that women have to help women. It's not a competition, but if we don't help each other, nobody's going to help us. And from that moment, I remember like my whole mind switched, and a lot of my experiences of then turning Milan into my home was that sentence when she said, you know what, we're here to help. So we can do this together. You're not alone. Yeah. You can always change your mind, but let's give it a shot. Yeah. What was your experience moving into a whole new country, new language, new culture, new everything?
Wow, it was very hard. It was very hard, and I only felt comfortable talking about this sort of this story after a few years because I had a huge culture shock moving to Denmark. In Romania, we are just a different culture altogether, and people are very easygoing also with their personal life, so they overshare sometimes. And in Denmark, people are very private. So I remember my first few weeks, I was wondering, why doesn't any of the people here want to be my friends? I just moved here with the purpose of, having this sort of setup where I make friends, and why is this not happening? And I feel that not knowing that, not having any sort of preparation was really hard. But I think within 6 months, I was like, okay, this is going to be okay. But it took me a few months to get used to it. I think the culture shock was quite big. And, it's a very competitive market. I came here with the idea that I will be a student worker. And so does every European citizen who can study in Denmark for free. So everybody has an equal chance of applying for all the jobs. And it took me a few months to find a job, even if I had experience before. And that was a huge eye-opener because I was always a hustler before. And I thought, I'm just going to go there and tell them I want to work for them. And then they were like, hey, you and many other people that do this. So, it was a wake-up call. Yeah, it was an experience that I don't know if I would want to have it the same, because at some point I was really like, oh, am I in the right spot here. But I met some amazing friends, and now I call Denmark my home. So yeah.
No, it is. It's a question of getting used to things, and it's a challenge. We can surely be a challenge, but I think that if we, as let's say now older expats, but also local people, if we realize that people are struggling and we can be helpful, this is something that I always think that is key. If we can help as much as we've been helped, I think it makes us stronger in the end of the day when we move forward. And I think that's a very valid point. I'm going to remind our audience that if you have any questions for me or for Alexandra or for us, or you want to throw at us, please feel free to use the chat. Thank you for your comments so far. They're beautiful and we appreciate them very much. Another topic that I wanted to touch upon together with you is something that we always discuss about when we talk about, especially how can we help promote women in tech, or how can we help promote career paths in the world of technology. And a lot of times what we say, and we've realized over the years, is that the one thing that is missing sometimes is these female role models that younger women, or even older women can have when they're trying to create their career path. For me, I have to say that we have a shared role model that we discussed about, which is, of course, the very successful Arianna Huffington, who for me has been an inspiration, really, coming from a small place in Greece and really creating her own career, her own family, and moving forward and being a very successful woman, very smart. And I love to hear her speak because she has a lot of very interesting insights. Is one type of role model that I have. Another type of role model that I have, which I've had the opportunity very much luckily to cooperate with, is the former vice president of Vivendi in Paris, Agnès Touraine, who for me is an exceptional businesswoman who I'm in awe that I was in the same room with her for so many times. And she really kind of brought the business of gaming with World of Warcraft and everything that goes around in that kind of area and technology, which was something very, very unique because nobody thought about women promoting gaming. But on the other hand, my personal also role model is something that a woman that not necessarily in technology, but I always look also at Tina Turner and I say, wow, this woman had such a hard life. And yet she really took control of her life. Like you said, she decided what she wanted to do. She loved herself. And for the love of her own self, she was able to be such a success. Who do you see as role models? I know it's kind of like it's a very big question. But I think it's important for us to kind of like identify these women that we can, that can shed some of their light on our lives as well.
Well, Arianna Huffington for sure, and my friends will laugh if they are now in this live stream because they know I'm a huge Beyonce fan, and I'm not just a fan of her music, but also of how she is a businesswoman, having her own production company, and being her own manager. Basically, it's an inspiring story for me, I feel. And Michelle Obama, it's definitely one of my role models. I look up to her and I follow everything she posts, and I always like, oh, I wonder what is this new initiative about. And then you have the role models around you, and I want to share that all of the people that I invited on the podcast were role models that I was personally interested in knowing more about, because I started a podcast from my own curiosity of just understanding how you make it, and this idea of being successful, because success is a very personal decision. What is success to you might not be the same definition for me. So that's why I was interested to know, what did you do to get to this point? Are you satisfied with what you have right now? And if you were to change something, would you do it differently? And it's really interesting to hear that even though I interview female role models from a new field of work every time I have an interview, I don't repeat the fields of work. in order to get more feedback on different career paths. But the learnings and advice that they share are very similar, and they are about the idea of taking it easy, not putting pressure on yourself, because many women put pressure on themselves that they need to be perfect at everything they do. And then if you get to a certain point, then what do you do from there? Because that's the peak. Nobody else did it. So what should I do right now? And then you start having this self-doubt of, should I continue? Should I not continue? And I really wanted to hear from those female role models, what was their journey. And I must say that I'm very inspired by the fact that I can go in my immediate network in Denmark and ask for help, and I get feedback. I am very engaged with the women in product community as a product manager, and I have a few role models such as Deepa and others that every time I contact them, they are there to help me. And I feel that, can this be any better? Because it's just such a nice community that we've built just by wanting to build a community together. And everybody that I interview and everybody that I interact with becomes a role model. I have become my I think I don't know if you are the most recent, because I interviewed a new person for my podcast, and I was like, oh, another person that I really admire. So you are definitely on my recent list of role models, because you've also had an extraordinary career. And then you've also been, in the venture space, and it's just amazing to hear all of those different experiences that led to where you are now. So it's just really inspiring.
I'm blushing now, but thank you. Thank you very much. When we talk about role models, we also talk about mentors a lot. And I have to say that when we talk about mentors, I'm going to say something that could be a bit of a provocation, but you know me, I like to do that. I also think that a lot of the times, looking at my personal mentors, throughout my career, as you mentioned, I worked for 10 years in venture. I came from a very non-financial background. So my mentors really had taught me everything I know, but they're still my mentors. The only difference being that I have a mixture of mentors that are female and also male. So it's not kind of like saying, I am who I am only because women helped me. No, I'm also who I am because I had a lot of very, very successful men who helped me in the process of doing what I'm doing. And I remember the founder of the fund that I used to work with, which was Jerusalem Venture Partners, and the founder, Erel Margalit, was once asked, why do you have so many women in your team? Because it was a fund that had a 50-50 female-male ratio, which is very strange in the venture world. And he said, I have a lot of women on my team, not because they're women, but because they're exceptional professionals. And this is something that I always said, you have to be a very strong man in order to be able to say, it's not about women and it's not about men, it's about professionals. And for me, that was very important, kind of like I was very young and important. It was important for me to hear. But also I allowed myself to look at other women in venture. Fiona Darmon is an exceptional Israeli venture capitalist that I think taught me almost everything I know, but also other people around me. It was a question of saying to myself, I need to learn, and I have a lot to learn. So I'm going to learn as much as I can, absorb as much as I can from the people around me. And that was also a question I was asked very often is, what made you go into venture? So I always said, it wasn't my lifelong dream to be working in venture capital. I kind of stumbled upon it. But then I took control over my life and I said, what, this is very interesting. This is something I like. Let me absorb as much as I can for the role that I'm doing now, but also for the future of what I need to be doing moving forward. How do you see this kind of male, female mentors, knowledge sharing and all of this kind of area?
Well, it's a very, very important point that we should make, that when you talk about women empowerment, you don't talk about women should now be the only ones that matter and then men should just step aside. I think, I even had this debate with myself. How should I name my podcast? Because it's about female role models, but then would it sound too female-ish? And then I was like, come on, my mission is to empower women. So I'm going to just call it Femme Lead because I just like that name. But I really thought about, what should I say? So that is not. And I think sometimes we get into these conversations of like, oh, but what if it sounds too much like this? And my advice is always to like look for champions of your mission, because there are champions of your mission everywhere. I've always been blessed, or just in the right setup, even though I do believe you attract what you are. So I really want to open-minded people that think that believe in equality. My first mentor, Andrei Costescu, from a startup in Bucharest, was the man that basically sparkled this idea in me of working in a startup. And I did, like you said, I didn't think about startups as something that I can do because I studied PR. So I was like, one day I'll end up writing a press release or something. But then I worked in a tech startup and I was like, oh, I'm really good at sales and I'm really good at processes. So business development is something that I'm interested in. I applied for a master's in entrepreneurship at Copenhagen Business School. I got in, and then I continued thinking that innovation comes from small agile teams that work together for this purpose. So now this is what I do, and I really enjoy it. I have promoters of female leaders in Novo Resume, all of my colleagues. I have promoters in my personal life, and I feel that we need to consider that this is not a male versus female issue. This is a universal issue, that equality and gender equality creates innovation. It represents everybody, and we should have everybody at the table, because we're not serving only half of the population. Basically, it's just some of the thoughts that I have on that.
Thanks so much. I'm looking at a little bit of the comments that were coming through, and actually the next question that I wanted to ask you kind of relates to a question that our friend Greta asked us, and she said, did you face any challenge in your working life only for the fact of being a woman? Sometimes women need to work harder than their male peers in order to earn recognition or praise. So taking a little bit about what Greta is asking, and asking you as well, I come from a very, very masculine environment, which is Israel, very, very military. My first career step was in the army, in a very, very male-oriented area. Then in venture, again, very, very male. And then I moved to Italy, which is taking steps forward, but still there's a lot to do. I'm very happy and honored that the company that I work for right now, Talent Garden, has actually a majority of female employees, which I think is a very, very important step, an important thing to make clear as we move forward. But it's not been easy. I'm going to add also that being a blonde woman in some of these circumstances makes it even harder. Being a foreigner is another hurdle that we have to go through. But I think that I faced many challenges of being the only woman in a room many times, or being mistaken as the person that is supposed to bring coffee instead of the person that is actually giving you your financial status as you're moving forward. But then I think that the way for me to overcome this challenge was to be very confident and saying, no, sorry, I'm actually here for something else, and not apologizing. So not saying, excuse me, I'm here, but being very confident in my standing. It's not easy. Sometimes you stand in front of very, very powerful men, and it's a challenge. But it's a challenge that I kind of like send everybody to go on this challenge. It's very, very empowering to overcome this kind of challenge in our day-to-day life. Do you think, though, we're seeing in the tech work and workplaces, and let's say in the innovation environment, moving forward? Are we going towards a more equal kind of ecosystem, or do we still have huge leaps and steps and boundaries to go through? How are you seeing it right now?
Yeah. Well, to just reply 1 second to Greta's comment, I think that, in different organizations, it will be harder for women to just make a point because of all the different levels of just stereotyping or ideas that people have about what the role should be. But I think that it's really important to stand up for yourself, and of course it's not for everybody. Not everybody will feel comfortable, so just do whatever is comfortable to you. But also, if you know that you are competent and that you should be there and that you have all the right criteria, there will be a place for you that will appreciate that if the current place doesn't. That is for sure. So I feel that you should never doubt yourself, just knowing all of the things that you know, because somebody has some different ideas of how the world should look like, and maybe you don't relate. Maybe you don't even need to be there. Taking responsibility for your life, choosing your battles, all of those ideas resonate with this. Where are you, and where you need to go in order to fulfill what your career path is? And in this line of women in tech, I feel that the changes that we're seeing is that the more we share stories of role models, the more people say, "Oh, that's amazing. I also have an amazing woman in my network that did that." When I shared with my male friends the fact that I'm starting a podcast on promoting female role models, and this is true story, I had many of them replying, "Oh, do you need people that are like super amazing? Because I have a list of females that I can write to you that have impacted my career so much. And I would love to just share the names of some of them, because I think you should interview them about their careers, because I think everybody should know what they did." And this is the sort of feedback that I'm talking about. When you share what you think, when you stand up for what your values are and for what you believe, you really attract that sort of reaction from people that respect what you believe and what you strive forward, and then they try to help you. Of course, you will also attract different sort of other impressions, but then you select not to spend your time on it. It's really fair. Like, of course, you might be in the right place, but in the wrong place. Sorry, but like Nicole mentioned here, one moment in my life that I'll never forget. I once worked as an MT for a tech startup, and the CEO of the group once introduced me in a meeting. I invited her here to have a woman in the call. Of course, she said, she replied, I'm sure I'm not here because of my gender, but because I'm competent. And then she's not working for that company anymore. Obviously, like, how can you, like, of course, there might be these situations.
It's like a few years ago, I decided to take a stand, let's say, and regardless to if it was going to hurt my career or promote my career, of saying, I'm not going to speak at conferences if I'm being invited to be the woman. I want to be invited as the professional that I am. And if it's not an easy choice, because you have to you have to be aware that some people are going to say, you know what, don't come. But it's a decision you have to make. And then it's controlling really your career path and where you're going. We have a few minutes left. So I want to do a very quick ping pong. This is a questionnaire inspired by Bernard Pivot, who created a very quick questionnaire of random questions that he used to ask his interviews. And I've created my Noa Segre à la Bernard Pivot. So I'm going to ask you 5 very quick questions. If you could just answer me in a short sentence. The first question is, if you could live anywhere in the world, where would it be and why?
I'm going to say Australia, because it's a warm country, and this is just, I don't know where else, because everywhere in Europe it's just amazing, but the reality of Denmark is that it is cold and gloomy sometimes. So
okay. The second question would be, if you could choose any other profession other than yours, what would it be?
I would be a psychologist or a therapist.
Excellent. Which profession would you never want to have?
I thought about it, and I really don't know. Nothing came to mind that it's. Okay. Did you think about it? Do you have a reply for that? Maybe I can get inspired from what you thought.
No offense to anybody in the audience, but really no offense. I have the highest appreciation. I would never want to be an accountant. I'm very bad with numbers. It's not my thing. It's just not my thing. But I have the highest appreciation to those who are accountants in the
Fair
audience.
enough.
Which piece of advice would you give your 15-year-old self?
I would tell my 15-year-old self to do exactly what I feel it's best for me, because it will make me the happiest.
And what would you like to tell your 85-year-old self?
I want to tell my 85-year-old self that I did all I could do. I'm happy with the decisions that I took because I did not compromise on my values.
Excellent. Super. Thank you so much for playing my game.
It was really fun, and I'm also happy that you got to share, some of your setups that you've had, because I feel that listeners can really hear from your story a lot of advice and learnings from how to navigate the career path.
And it's not simple. I'm telling it's not easy, but it's possible. And this is, I think, the main message is to say, and this is something I would want to tell my 15-year-old self, but also my imaginary children and neighbors and everyone, of saying, we should, as a society, men, women, all over the world, tell our girls that they can be whatever they want to be in the world, and nothing should stop them, nothing should take them back, and they could be anything they want, anything they desire, anything they feel they can do. This is what we should be telling the girls. So this is something that I also, when men ask me what should we do, this is exactly this: be the fathers, the brothers, the bosses, the cousins, the neighbors that say this to our children. I think this is the future of a better world. We have a couple of minutes, and I have a question that I wanted to ask you that I see here from River, who's asking regarding preconceived notions about women in the workspace. What are your preferred references or studies you suggest for us to read? And what I'm going to say actually is listen to Alexandra's podcast. It's also very important as this kind of reference, but go ahead, Alexandra.
Definitely. So when we talk about references of what you should read on this topic of how women are perceived at the workplace or what their situations are, I would ask everybody that wants to ask their female friends if they've ever been in a situation where they personally have felt discouraged or discriminated or in any way uneasy with their situation at work. And I can guarantee you that somebody will say, yes, I have been very uncomfortable. And it's not something that I can tell you that a McKinsey study did, but I'm sure that if you ask your group of friends, you will see just some situations that you just are not aware of. But on that note, we have on the Nova Resume blog a Women in the Workplace study that we've done based on a LinkedIn report and Harvard Business Review report. And also there are yearly reports on women in the workplace, women in STEM. They're shared by McKinsey, they're shared by BCG. So this is, some of them are for the US market, some of them are for the UK market. You have Women in STEM as an organization that just focuses on that. A couple of other examples, are Women in Tech as organizations that do studies locally. So we have a Women in Tech DK organization, and they're all around the world. And since you've mentioned my podcast, I also want to share that some of the questions I ask are about the challenges that you had to overcome, and it's not always about gender. So that's the point with the podcast, is not to showcase that everything happens because of gender. It's just your career path. So I think that just by listening to somebody else's experience, you can understand and maybe just realize, is there a difference of how this happened to me? And just draw your own conclusions as well, because you will not hear it all the time directly, oh, this happened because I was a woman. And it shouldn't be like that, because it's not always true. It's for sure, this is not the message that I want to share, that everything happens because we're women. But it's just important to understand that there are some differences in sometimes on how we are perceived or on the opportunities we get. And the more we talk about it, the more we can go towards a way that meets in the middle and everybody's happy, and we build a very inclusive workplace.
Definitely. So thank you, Alexandra. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. It's been my pleasure, as always, to talk to you, and I look forward to continuing this dialogue. We, of course, can't wait to host you here in Milan when you come. Thank you again. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your insights. It's been extremely inspiring. So have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks a lot.